If you ask 10 people on your street, what's the smartest financial move an adult can make? At least 8 of them would say the same thing. Buy a house. Stop throwing money away on rent. Now, imagine I told you this. For decades, I was one of the richest men in America, and I was perfectly happy not buying more houses. In fact, for a long stretch of my life, I would have considered buying a big new primary home, one of the worst investments I could make with my own money. That sounds like heresy in the United States. Real estate agents won't like it. Mortgage brokers won't like it. A few politicians won't like it either. But this video isn't about what they like. It's about something much simpler: math and opportunity cost. Over the next few minutes, you and I are going to walk through what a $400,000 house really costs over 30 years. What happens if you combine that with the power of compounding somewhere else, and why so many people end up house rich and cash poor, even though they did what everyone told them was smart. By the end, you'll understand why buying a primary home too early can quietly destroy millions in potential wealth when buying does make sense, and what to do instead if you actually care more about financial freedom than lawn pride. Let's start with the part that makes people uncomfortable. The myth: a house is always a great investment. Most people don't buy a house because they carefully ran the numbers. They buy a house because their parents told them it's the American dream. Their friends are doing it. They're tired of rent going up. They like the feeling of ownership. None of those are financial reasons. They're emotional reasons. Now, there's nothing wrong with emotions. You're not a spreadsheet. You're a human being. But when you mix emotional decisions with 30-year debt, you can pay a very high tuition. Real wealth is not stuff you own. That doesn't pay you. Real wealth is assets that throw off cash and give you options. A primary house is, for most people, a consumption item that's been beautifully marketed as an investment. So let's strip away the marketing and look at just one simple example. What a $400,000 house actually costs, ask the average person. How much does a $400,000 house cost? They'll answer immediately, $400,000. That's wrong. Not because they're bad at math, but because nobody ever taught them the full equation. Let's walk through it slowly. We'll be conservative. Reality is often harsher. 1, the down payment. Most people aim for 20% on a $400,000 house. That's $80,000. That money is now locked in your walls instead of working in the market. At 10% annual returns over 30 years, that $80,000 alone could grow to roughly $1.04 million. We'll come back to that. 2, the mortgage. You borrow the remaining $320,000. Let's use a 30-year fixed mortgage at 7% interest. Not a crazy number in recent years. Monthly payment, roughly $2,129 over 30 years, $766,440 in total payments of that. About $446,440 is interest you effectively pay for the house more than twice. 3, property taxes. National average property tax rates are around 1.1% of home value per year, often higher in popular metro areas. 1.1% of $400,000 is $4,400 per year over 30 years. Assuming modest appreciation and higher assessments, you might pay around $180,000 in property taxes for. Homeowners insurance, say $1,500 per year over 30 years, $45,000 5. Maintenance and repairs, there's an old rule of thumb. Budget 1.3% of home value per year for maintenance. Let's be gentle and use 1.5%. 1.5% of $400,000 is $6,000 per year over 30 years, $180,000. And that's if the universe is kind. New roof, major plumbing, foundation issues, HVAC replacement. These can blow holes in that estimate. 6 HOA fees. If you're in a typical development or condo, you'll see HOA dues. Call it $250 per month as a middle-of-the-road number. Over 30 years, roughly $90,000. We're still not done. 7, higher utilities versus renting houses are often bigger and less efficient than the modest apartment you might otherwise rent. An extra $150 per month on average over 30 years, about $54,000 8. Closing costs and commissions to buy. You'll pay maybe 25% of the purchase price in closing costs. On $400,000, say $10,000, $20,000 to sell. You'll likely pay around 6% in realtor commission. If the house is worth $600,000 when you sell, 6% is $36,000. Let's lump buying and selling together at a conservative $50,000 total. The conservative total, add the big pieces: down payment, $80,000 mortgage payments, $766,440 property taxes, $180,000 insurance, $45,000 maintenance. $180,000 HOA fees, $90,000 extra utilities, $54,000 closing plus commissions. $50,000 total out of pocket over 30 years, $31,445,440. You bought a $400,000 house. You spent roughly $1.45 million over 30 years. Now, maybe that house is worth $600,000 in nominal terms after 3 decades. In real purchasing power after inflation, it may not even be that impressive. So you spent $1.45 million to end up with a $600,000 illiquid asset. That doesn't pay you a dime unless you either sell it and move or borrow against it. That's not a disaster. But it's not the miracle asset people think it is either. And remember, we've ignored surprises: divorce, job relocation, market crashes, major repairs beyond the averages. Now let's talk about the part almost nobody factors in, what else that money could have done. The opportunity cost, house Via's compounding earlier, we parked that $80,000 down payment. At a conservative 10% average annual return over 30 years, $80,000 can grow to around $1.04 million. But that's only the first piece. Let's say you could rent a similar place for $1,500 per month instead of paying a $2,129 mortgage. Monthly difference, $629. If you invested that $629 per month for 30 years at 10% average returns, the future value is roughly $1.03 million. Now combine them: down payment invested, $1.04, monthly savings invested, $1.03, total potential portfolio after 30 years, around $2.07 million. Compare 2 paths over those same 30 years. Path 1, buy, spend $21.45. All and end up with a house worth $2,600, little liquid wealth. Path 2, rent. And invest, spend less on housing each month, end up with $22.07 in liquid investments. One choice gives you a house that looks good on a net worth statement, but doesn't feed you. The other choice gives you actual financial freedom. That's the difference between being house rich, cash poor, and being able to tell your boss, no, I don't think I'll be coming in next year. Why the buy a house myth refuses to die if the math is so compelling. Why does almost everyone still push home ownership as the smartest move? 3 big reasons. 1, incentives. Real estate agents only get paid when you buy and when you sell. They earn a percentage of the transaction, not a percentage of your future freedom. Banks love mortgages. You send them predictable interest for 30 years. It's one of the best products they have. Politicians love home building and home ownership because it stimulates the economy and makes voters feel stable. Tax breaks and subsidies are designed to keep the machine humming. Nobody in that chain profits when you rent modestly and quietly build a multi-million-dollar index fund portfolio. 2, generational mismatch. Your parents or grandparents might have bought a house when prices were 20 times household income. Interest rates, while sometimes high, were often followed by periods of strong wage and asset growth. There was less competition from institutional investors bidding up homes. Today, in many U.S. cities, homes cost 10 times median income, and mortgage rates have climbed sharply from their lows. The math they use doesn't automatically carry over to your world. They're not lying to you. They're just giving advice calibrated for a different era. 3, psychology and pride. Once someone has spent 30 years paying off a house, they have a powerful emotional need to believe it was a smart financial decision. So they say things like, at least I'm not throwing money away on rent. I'm building equity. There's some truth in that, but equity in a primary home is not the same as a portfolio of productive assets. You can't sell the kitchen to pay your grocery bill. It's very easy to be asset heavy and income light, especially heading into retirement. That's not a position you want to be in. When buying a house actually makes sense now. Let's be clear. This is not never buy a house. There are situations where buying is perfectly reasonable if you understand what you're doing. 1, long-term stability, 10, 15 years in one place. If you're very confident you'll stay in the same city, in the same home for at least 10, 15 years, you spread those big transaction costs over a long period. In that scenario, buying can be reasonable, especially in a fairly priced market too. Buying well below market value if you're capable of finding distressed deals, negotiating hard, and buying 30-40% under fair value. That instant equity can offset some of the long-term costs. But that's work. It's not showing up at an open house and offering full asking price because the kitchen feels nice. 3, house hacking. If you buy a small multi-unit property, duplex, triplex, fourplex, live in one unit, and rent the others, you're not really a typical homeowner. You're a small landlord whose tenants help pay the mortgage property taxes, and upkeep that can build wealth. 4, low-cost markets where buy, find, rent in some towns, especially away from the big coast. The cost to own can be very close to the cost to rent. In that narrow band, buying doesn't crush your investing potential. 5, after you're already financially free, once you have a few $1,000,000 invested and your living expenses are covered by your portfolio, buying a home with cash is a lifestyle choice, not an investment decision. You've already won the game. Now you're choosing how to enjoy it. The danger is for people who are still building wealth and lock themselves into a big, illiquid, expensive house instead of feeding their compounding machine. So what should you do instead? If you're under, say, 50 years old, still on the way up, what's a more rational path? Here are the broad strokes. 1, rent modestly and invest aggressively. Choose a safe, comfortable rental that costs far less than the mortgage you'd qualify for. Take the down payment you didn't spend plus the monthly savings plus all the surprise costs you didn't incur, maintenance, HOA spikes, big repairs, and invest them. Even $750 per month invested in a broad low-cost index fund for 30 years at 10% average returns becomes over $1.07 million. Most homeowners will never see that number in liquid assets. 2, consider house hacking early. If you're willing to be a landlord, use a small down payment loan, like say to buy a duplex or fourplex, live in one unit, rent the others. Done well, your housing cost collapses or disappears, and you're left with an appreciating income-producing asset. 3, use REITs and stocks for real estate exposure if you believe in real estate long-term, but don't want the toilets and tenants. You can buy real estate investment trusts, broad market index funds full of businesses that own and operate property. These give you income and appreciation without the personal leverage and hassle of owning your own primary house as an investment. 4, focus on your career and business first. An $80,000 down payment could also fund specialized training that doubles your income seed capital for a small business, move you into a higher earning industry. A business growing at 20-30% per year will usually beat a house growing at 3-4% per year over the same period. The real decision, house or freedom, here's the painful, honest version. For many people in today's prices and interest rate environment, the choice is not house and wealth. It's house or wealth. You can sink your prime saving and investing decades into paying for a big primary residence and reach your 60s with a paid-off house and very little else. Or you can rent modestly, invest consistently, build a portfolio of productive assets. And then, if you still want a house, buy one later when it's a rounding error in your net worth. One path gives you a nice lawn and chronic anxiety about money. The other path gives you choices. You've just seen the rough math. Even with conservative assumptions, a normal 30-year mortgage can quietly consume over $1 million that could have been compounding for you instead. So before you sign a 30-year contract, because everyone around you says it's time to settle down and build equity, ask one simple question: am I buying freedom or am I buying a feeling? If you're under 50, still building, and not financially independent yet, you don't have to follow the script your parents used. You can rent strategically, invest the difference, and let compounding work for you instead of for the bank. If this shifted the way you think about the American dream, do 2 things. Comment below with the city you live in and whether buying or renting makes more sense on actual numbers where you are. Share this video with the one friend who's feeling pressured to buy a house this year. They might not thank you today. They might thank you in 30 years when they're financially free instead of just mortgage free.